Bienvenido al podcast de The Way. Si quieres aprender inglés y hablar con confianza, estás en el sitio correcto. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a mejorar su inglés y alcanzar sus objetivos. Visita nuestra web theway.es para conocer más sobre nuestros cursos online desde A2 hasta C1 y descubre cómo podemos ayudarte a avanzar en tu aprendizaje. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen Language Pair cómodamente desde casa.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Real Life, Real English. And today we are joined by a really special guest, Harry Waters. Welcome.
Oh, I'm the special guest. Oh, hi. Hello.
There he is. And Harry's from Renewable English, which we're going to be talking about a lot today. There it is in the background.
It's everywhere.
Which I suspect a lot of people, especially if you're teachers, you would have heard about the mission that Harry is on. But before we get into Renewable English and the good that that's doing, we're going to learn a little bit about Harry. So first off, tell us a bit about your story. Where were you from originally? What brought you to Spain, etc., and how did you get into this industry?
Oh, lots of big questions. How long do we have? I'm originally from Northampton in England. And by the age of 12, I realised that was not a place I wanted to be anymore. But sadly, I wasn't legally allowed to leave until I was 18, at which point I went off to university, studied politics because, to be perfectly honest, it was the easiest of the degrees I could see available. And I had to spend as little time studying in comparison to other subjects that I liked. And also, I was recommended not to do drama, which was, anyway, that's a whole different trauma. We'll brush over that one, or we'll get far too deep into my, well, not quite childhood traumas, but certainly adolescent ones. And then after uni, I worked 3 jobs so I could earn enough money to leave the UK. I went off, I did my Stelter in Argentina in 2007, and then I traveled around South America a bit, worked in Brazil for about a year, went off to China, Vietnam, Australia, and then I came to Spain. Now, you asked why I came to Spain.
Yeah.
Interesting story. I say interesting. I find it interesting. Other people will probably think it's very boring. While I was living in Brazil, I had 2 lessons that were about 4 hours apart. But luckily, there was a shopping centre not very far away. In that shopping centre was a bookshop.
Uh-huh.
In that bookshop were many books. Now, I like books. And one of my favourite books in there was a book of Bridges of the World. I love bridges. I don't know why. I've always loved bridges. They're, engineering genius. And I was looking through this book and I saw the Alamillo Bridge. So for anyone who's been to Seville, you will know it. It's the world's first single-sided suspension bridge. And I said to myself in, I think it must have been early 2008, yeah, I'm going to live in Seville one day.
Because of the bridge?
Yeah, because of a bridge. And then I came here because of a bridge. I didn't stay because of the bridge. There are many reasons as to why I stayed. I won't get into those right now, but I can now see the bridge when I have a shower.
Incredible.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of a poo with a view, but a shower with a view?
Exactly. The view from pooing isn't great, to be honest. It's just my back garden, but the shower with a view is pretty cool.
Happy days. Now, one thing I just noticed there when you were saying, like, this is an interesting story for me, but no one else. I think being English teachers, we have to make the story interesting. And one thing that I've noticed by listening to some of the podcasts that you've been on and some of your classes on YouTube is that you're a really good storyteller. But one thing I noticed at the start is when you were saying about where you traveled, it's like, yeah, I've been to Vietnam, China, Thailand, South America, blah, blah. Like we skip over these things like they're such little parts of our lives. But that must have been like a massive part of your life. So that part of the story, it's like, yeah, that part's boring, but the bridge. And then you led us down this road to talking about a bridge and the suspension, mind my pun there, to tell us why you moved to Seville, and it's all in the story. And obviously, the bridge was the main topic of that story. But let's rewind back to some of these other countries that you've taught in and compare it to Spain. What did you learn from each of those countries? Was there something you can take away?
I remember my first ever lesson I ever had was quite strange, actually. It was at ExxonMobil, which is an oil company. Not really in keeping with the current branding, obviously. But no, I was working for an agency, and they would send us out. And my first ever job was in an oil exec's office, basically,
Right.
overlooking the Rio Harbor. And I've walked in there. I was 23 years old. I was just like, no idea what to do here. Really, intimidated by where I was. So I just said to the guy, we're going to switch places. So I sat in his seat and he sat in the other side of the desk to kind of change the dynamic. Also, because I really wanted to stare out the window at the view and think that I had made it.
Was there a bridge?
No bridge. No, sadly, no bridge. There was Sugarloaf Mountain, which was pretty cool.
Nice.
And yeah, the Rio Harbor is very beautiful. So that was cool. But I was in that kind of phase of, when you've just spent 1 month doing your CELTA and, you've finally learned what a past participle is. And you realize that the third conditional isn't the movement on the air conditioner. And you're like, now I know everything. This is brilliant. My 1 month of training and I know everything. So I was very much in that kind of I know everything mode at the start of your teaching career when you think that you know everything. That disappeared probably a while afterwards. But so yeah, Brazil was a really nice way of kind of getting into things. And I did a lot of one-to-one classes and business classes and stuff like that. However, that changed quite dramatically when I moved to China. When I was teaching, classes of 60 10-year-olds. So yeah, 600 years old in one room.
Wow.
Yeah, and it suddenly went from, the South American, very chatty, very happy to talk, not so kind of scared about their mistakes, to this very disciplined environment where there were 60 children in a room, sometimes 60 teenagers in a room, and there's not a sound. Like everyone was absolutely silent. I even remember one boy was particularly disruptive, so I asked to speak to him outside, and another one of the teachers came by and said, "Oh, do you need me to deal with him?" And I was like, "What do you mean deal with him?" And he was like, and held up his ruler, and I was just like, "No, you don't need to deal with him. He's fine. It's all right." No, I don't think so. I think dealing with, and yeah, no, not a fan of that. So yeah, I asked him not to deal with him. But in those huge classes, it's so difficult to reach everyone. So you have to involve a lot of classroom games, relay kind of races where you start at the front and end at the end and try and get everyone to speak. And you employ a lot of classroom assistants because you can't hear everything, you can't be everywhere. And sometimes you end up just teaching the 10 kids at the front who are very interested, and it's like you can't allow that to happen, but none of us are perfect. And then Vietnam was a lot of academy work where I was working 7 days a week, just trying to earn money basically, because the pay was very good and the rent was very cheap. So I just spent 3 months in the north of Vietnam working non-stop. Then I traveled for a month down to the south, and then I spent 5 months working, I think, with 1 day off.
Wow.
Yeah, I had an interesting hospital experience there, which I won't go into on the podcast because yeah, it involved an ultrasound and a number of Vietnamese health professionals looking at my genitalia. So yeah,
I thought we weren't going to go into it.
we're not going into it. I'm going
We're
to
not.
leave it at that. And if anybody wants to hear that story, feel free to get in touch. But thankfully, everything was fine, and I was on show for all of Vietnam. And
I
then
didn't get your
Australia,
OnlyFans details, actually.
yeah, I don't have those, I'm afraid. And then in Australia, I was working in a language academy with multilingual classes for the first time. So it was really fun to kind of find that way. And I was teaching IELTS there, actually with somebody who I've recently worked with as well, Anna Hasper. She was my boss, but we didn't realize it till 10 years later. Strange things that happen.
Yeah.
And I taught there for a while before it closed down. I take the blame for that. It was definitely my fault. I brought that company to its knees. And then I came to Spain, and it was a bit of a shock after the kind of South America, the Southeast Asian, very disciplined, very polite, to the kind of let's all scream and shout and not pick up our rubbish off the floor. So yeah, that was a potted history in quite a big nutshell of how I started teaching.
And as you've been speaking, I've been making notes. So we're going to go right back to the beginning and compare two things that you said. So you said by the age of 12,
yes,
you wanted to leave. And then afterwards, you said you were intimidated by. Now we've used by there, by the age of 12, and intimidated by in two completely different meanings. How could you explain the difference to English learners with the word by there? So by the age of 12, should we start on that one?
Well, you're talking about reaching that stage. So from 1 to 11, I was fine with it. And by the time, so when I reached 11, 12 was when I realized that in that case, I wanted to leave. You know, when you're talking about, I don't know, by the time I'd put my shoes on, you know, everything before that had happened. And then you reached your shoes putting on, you were able to leave the house, you know.
Yeah.
Or I've lived in 12 cities by the age of 18. So, you know, by the time I reached 18, you're talking about that very point. So before that, and then by the time is that very point.
Yeah, and we use that expression a lot with the past perfect, don't we? Like by the time the man got to the station, the train had already left. So it's a good expression for everyone to bear in mind. And then you said intimidated by. How could we explain that one?
Well, obviously, it's the when you're working with these lovely collocations, intimidated goes very well with by, because that's it. They are partners in crime. And yeah, you're talking about the thing or the person that intimidates you. So I don't know, when you find a really big book and you look at it and you're like, oh, I was intimidated by the size of the book. So you're knowing that it's the size of the book that was intimidating, not the front cover of the book, not the author of the book. But you're looking at the specific thing that you find intimidating. In my case, working with an oil executive in Brazil.
Yeah. And then afterwards, when you were saying about the English Academy that no longer exists, you said you're going to take full credit for bringing it to its knees. You brought it to its knees. A great expression. Let's explain that one to the audience.
Yeah. To bring something to its knees is to make it... I was going to say resign then. I didn't mean resign. To make it give up, basically, because, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen like TV shows or from the old days when they yield, where they go down to their knees and they give power to something else. So to bring something to its knees is to end it effectively, in not the nicest kind of way of saying it, you know. So I'd love to bring the Trump administration to its knees. That kind of thing might be something that a reasonable, rational human might say.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me, I don't know if you're a fan of golf, but recently there was a big tournament, the Masters, in a place called Augusta. in Atlanta, and a player called Rory McIlroy won the competition, and it meant that he won the Grand Slam, which is all of the major competitions that there are in golf. And when he putted out on the last green to win the competition, he went down onto his knees, and it brought him to his knees. So there's an example there of it being used in a positive way as well. His emotions brought him to his knees, but that's more literal than to take down a company or a Trump administration.
It wasn't me that took down the company, by the way. It definitely wasn't me at all.
And very, very quickly, talking golf. So I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and you were talking about charity shops and your love for charity shops and for bright, crazy shirts. And I thought, I need to put on a bright, crazy shirt for this podcast. And the only one that I have, I'm a very black and white kind of fashion guy. I can't pull off a big beard and crazy tops like you can. But the only one I had was this fluorescent golf shirt.
The Great Golf Company.
Yeah, I thought I'd put this one on for the show, and I've outdone you today on brightness.
I know, I'm quite understated. I do have a cardigan on top because, it's almost pajama weather at the moment, and I could probably take that one off.
Nice.
There you go. It's not vibrant, but it's still nice, and it's still secondhand.
And that's a good segue to get into our real life, real English talk, which is obviously we're going to be talking about sustainability and the environment. And you obviously are a big advocate of buying secondhand things and reusing things. And there's lots of tips that we can give to people when it comes to saving the world and things. But how can we get them to actually put it into practice?
Well, the great thing about, let's just focus on the climate crisis for now in general, because there are all sorts of other areas and rabbit holes that we can go down. So focusing on the climate crisis, that it isn't just one thing. It isn't just fossil fuels. It isn't just animal agriculture. It isn't just aviation. It isn't just traffic. There are so many different things that are involved in the climate crisis. And when it comes to teaching our students, when it comes to talking to our students, particularly younger students, it can be difficult not to sound like, you're preaching and you're telling them, oh, what you do is bad and what I do is great because I buy secondhand and you buy from chain stores. You're evil and you're killing the planet. That's never going to work. But finding the area that your students are interested in, finding the part of the climate crisis that they do care about, and trying to integrate that into the lessons and making it fun, particularly if you're working with very young learners, it's very easy. You can get little kids excited about anything. I used to have flag of the week with my young learners. I love flags as well. I'm a bit of a vexillologist. And I used to have flag of the week. And I remember a few years back bumping into one of my old students, Jaime, and he asked me, oh, is your favorite flag still the Marshall Islands? This was 10 years after his classes with those. So you can get young kids involved in anything. You can encourage them to do almost anything as long as you are passionate about it. It gets more difficult as people get older. But
I think that's... Go on.
No, go ahead.
I think that's one really important point just for people listening that have a speaking exam coming up, is if you show that you're interested and enthusiastic about something, the examiner's going to feel that enthusiasm. When you're speaking, like I said, you're a great storyteller, but also you use your voice to keep people's attention. So just now, basic vocabulary, however, you made it sound really good. So I always tell my students off for using very. But if you use it with enthusiasm, it kind of gets lost in the conversation anyway. And I'm not going to pick them up for going, yeah, it was very boring. but it was, oh my God, it was very interesting. It's like, that's much better. And you used the word, or you said, there are so many different things. You just stressed everything to keep everyone's attention. And I think our students need to learn that a lot of the time, it's not the words that you use, it's how you say it that keeps
100%.
the attention. So by watching people like Harry, and I'm quite animated when I speak, try to bring that into the exam, and it will hopefully calm them down as well, because they can move and things instead of sat there, arms crossed. Having that animation with body movement and things is gonna make it sound much better.
I always tell my students to turn it into a show, turn it in, make it a performance, because it's a horrible thing to do, a speaking exam. It's unnatural, it's contrived, it's the weirdest thing, and it's not really the best way of testing if somebody can speak English or not. But it's what you have to do for the exam. It's what you have to do to pass the exam. So it's 15 minutes. Of those 15 minutes, how much of that are you actually speaking? Maybe 5. Use those 5 minutes and go wild. Be, like you say, be interested in the examiner. Go when you walk in, take those first few moments when you walk in, show them the English that you know. No, it won't go down on your mark sheet, but it will leave a good impression. So opening the door, asking how they are, asking which chair you should sit in, just those simple things before the exam even starts, just to leave that first impression.
Yeah. And in the language cert exam, they'd need to give a little monologue as part of the exam, and they get given the subject, which they have no idea what it is until I give it to them, or the examiner gives it to them. They have a little bit of preparation time. And what we've found is that students turn around and go, yeah, but I don't know anything about that topic. And I'm like, say that, but say it with enthusiasm. So to be honest, I have absolutely no idea. And by using like the absolutely no idea about that subject, however, I am going to talk about what I do know about that subject, and maybe a past story. Yeah. So even if you don't know, you can kind of get around it and sound enthusiastic about it.
Exactly. Again,
about it. Yeah.
When it comes to like the picture sections of exams as well, because I know that a lot of those, in the Cambridge suite especially, there's, describe this picture or compare these pictures. So often students say what they can see and then just kind of go, well, I've finished after 15, 20 seconds. It's like, no, it's not about the picture. It's not at all about the picture. Talk about the feelings behind the picture. Talk about what you can't see. Just invent it. It doesn't matter. The examiner wants to hear you're speaking. They don't want to hear if you can correctly describe a picture.
Exactly. So, it's there as a prompt to help them. And if you see 2 people riding horses, well, your topic is outdoor activities, sports, nature, and then you can talk about those things. And everyone has a story to tell. And
talk about why you're scared of horses, or not scared of horses, or that you should never look a gift horse in the mouth, or you should get back on the horse.
Right, we're going to break them down. I'm gonna pass it to you to break it down. Let's go through them again, and we'll break each one down individually.
A couple of fun idioms for you there, brought about by horses. Thanks for that, Anthony. I like horses. There's lots of horses in my village. But to never look a gift horse in the mouth is if somebody offers you something, and people often say, like, oh, no, no, no. I remember the first time I ever heard it was my great uncle Charlie wanted to give me a clock. I was about 6, and I just wanted to be polite. I didn't want to take anything off this sweet old man. And I kept saying, no, Uncle Charlie, I don't want it. I did want the clock. It was a really cool clock. And my great Uncle Charlie said, you should never look a gift horse in the mouth. Where the phrase came from, I don't know. I could probably find out. I might ask my friend Stephen to put that as one of his idioms over on LinkedIn. But yeah, if somebody's offering you something, don't turn it down. Accept it. Say, yes, thank you very much. Like if Anthony sends you a message saying, would you like to come on my podcast? Don't look that gift horse in the mouth and say, sure, I'd love to. And I'm not calling you a horse, Anthony.
I don't know. I could take it as a compliment, to be honest.
Horses are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then the other one was to get back on the horse. And that refers to if you fall off the horse, you should get back on it, because usually people are scared. So if you stop doing something, let's say you stop going to the gym, your New Year's resolution is to go to the gym. And by January the 4th, you've stopped going to the gym and you're like, I give up. I'm just going to pay the gym for the next 12 months and not go there anymore. What you need to do is get back on the horse, go and try again. Or you studied English until you were 16 and then you stopped for 5 years and now you're at university and you have to get the B1 or the B2 or whatever you need to get. You have to get back on the horse and get back into your English lessons and start learning again.
Yeah. And that another reason why I just love two English teachers having a general chat, because all these things come about randomly. And there's so much that we can then pass on to the audience. But let's get back onto your mission of saving the planet.
Exactly.
And talk about how you're kind of saving the planet. I'm going to say one classroom at the time, because you're teaching teachers how to teach their students all about the environment and making it fun. That's the important thing, because we've all seen the textbooks that have one unit, if we're lucky, about the environment. And some of them, they're getting better. I've got to say, the textbooks are getting better. I remember from 10 years ago, they were shocking. And the students would all look at you blank face going, really?
Polar bears again.
Yeah. But now I think it's becoming more of a spoken about topic, and they have more of an interest to learn about it. And the materials are obviously making it more interesting to talk about it as well. So let's talk about your mission to get into the classrooms. How are you going about teaching teachers and your mission?
Ooh, lots of different ways, to be honest. I've been very lucky to work with a number of publishers who are very keen to impress these ideas upon teachers. So I've been lucky enough to do some teacher training with other publishers. But then with Renewable English, we've got a training course. I also work with Nile in the summer, where we have different teachers come in for 2-week training courses. So it's a lot more in depth than usually. It starts with kind of an hour or 2 hours, which obviously isn't enough to talk about the entire climate crisis. But when it is an hour or 2 hours, it's all about sparking those ideas. So it's all about finding the students' passion. It's all about looking for those small things, because we're not going to solve the climate crisis simply by litter picking, which I love doing. But that is a great way to spark environmentalism within our students. So telling our teachers how they can turn a litter pick into an English language activity and how to work on it in that way is a great way to show, how it can all be connected. And, when you open a textbook, there'll be sections on sport, there'll be sections on fashion, there'll be nothing focusing it on the impact that those things have on the planet, or the impact that those things have on gender equality, for example. So going in there and looking for those segues, as it were, to find a way to talk about the planet and other social justice issues. So I try and help teachers see those opportunities. And I also teach myself. I do a lot of workshops with students, and I try and help students find their passion, because it's changing that mindset. It's all about, suddenly thinking, okay, maybe I don't need a new pair of jeans. Maybe I could get a secondhand pair of jeans, or maybe just because my phone screen is cracked, I don't need a brand new phone. Maybe I could repair the screen, or just live with it like 90% of people do. And next time, get a screen guard. He tells himself every time with his
You're not alone.
8,000-year-old cracked phone. So it's about just sparking those ideas and getting that gentle mindset shift.
Yeah, mindset's a good word. How would we explain mindset to English learners?
I guess it's the way you think about and see a certain thing. So I actually have a book called Activities for a Greener Mindset. So in this way, we're looking at students looking to become more green focused, the way they think about the world, having their mind set on a greener world. So, you talk about other types, you have a growth mindset where the way you think, you grow with things, it's not about winning and losing, it's about winning and learning. These different ideas. So your mindset is literally the way that you set your mind to doing something.
Yeah. And the growth mindset is for the teachers out there. That's very Class Dojo. If any of them use that app,
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
had a series, I think, called the growth mindset, and you can have a positive and a negative mindset as well, optimistic, pessimistic. So yeah, some really good vocab there. Mindset, the way you think about something. And you're saying about how to spark a student's interest. I love the word to spark an interest as well, because it kind of, for people listening, a spark is something that we have when we try to start a fire. It's like that real quick bolt of light that comes up is a spark. So to spark someone's interest, it's like they're listening to something and then all of a sudden they're interested. And I love the way that in English we can use things like that to describe, they got interested in something, but no, I sparked an interest. It sparked
Exactly,
an
and it
interest.
kind of starts the fire as well, hopefully. You can spark the interest that starts the fire, because you need a spark to start a fire. Otherwise it won't.
And
it would
one
just
of the
be
things,
a lot of petrol.
one of the things we see a lot with students that have the tendency to behave badly in class is trying to find a connection with them to English, so that they've now got an interest in learning English and they want to learn English, and they lose that bad behavior. They're normally behaving badly because they're a little bit bored in class, or they don't understand and they don't see why they need to understand. So it's trying to find that connection as teachers, which I think is one of our biggest jobs with each individual student, which must have been impossible in Vietnam with 60 kids in a classroom.
It was tricky.
However, finding what each individual student likes and then connecting to them and hoping that then they take on a pride in themselves to self-teach as well. And I think a huge example of this is through your daughter, Ali. You've obviously noticed that she had an interest in what you were doing, and you've motivated and kind of fed that fire that she's had. And I haven't seen the video, but I've heard lots of people online talking about the talk that both of you did on stage in America, wasn't it?
As in Scotland.
Oh, in Scotland.
Great golfing country.
Yes. Yeah. So tell us about that journey of seeing the spark that your daughter had, and then feeding that fire to where she is now and the mission that she's on.
I don't really think I can take much credit, to be honest. It was one day during lockdown that we were sitting there, and obviously during lockdown, parents became teachers, which is lucky because my wife and I were both teachers at the time. She's now a photographer, but also a teacher of photography. So that never dies.
Once a teacher, always a teacher.
Exactly. So we were doing lots of different activities. So we were trying to do maths, but maths was boring. So we were doing audits of our plastics and our different recycling things. We were doing these different ideas to try and keep on top of it. And then we were watching a YouTube show called Let's Go Live with Maddie and Greg. They're not a couple anymore. Very sad. Very sad. Doesn't exist anymore, obviously. So yeah, Let's Go Live. We absolutely loved it. We watched it every day. In fact, Ali got on one of the episodes because she talked about her bilingual dog. She spoke to our dog and she told it to sit down in English and Spanish, and she did. And then one day, two inspirational young people came on, Amy and Ella Meek from Kids Against Plastic. Mm-hmm. And Ali saw these two guys, was like, "Wow, what they're doing is amazing." They're they're fighting plastic pollution. They're doing all these other things. So soon after that, I actually interviewed Amy, who at the time I think was 16. Yeah, she was 16 at the time, for the first series of Renewable English. And yeah, she was just like, yeah, we've got a kids club, a Kids Against Plastic club, if Ali wants to come along. So from the age of 6.5, 7, Ali was going along to these meetings on a Saturday morning and learning about different things about the environment, and doing talks. They call them voices presentations. So the kids are the meetings are run by kids there, and it's all about empowering the next generation of people. And then 2 years ago in 2023, Kids Against Plastic were invited to speak at the World Retail Congress. So Ali went there and confronted CEOs of Primark and Mango about their use of fashion, basically. And then last year she spoke about individual power and collective action, focusing on her 1 million litter pick in Paris. And then this year we did the closing plenary together at IATEFL, where she asked questions to education, basically. Why do we still do all this rubbish stuff from 300 years ago? So yeah, she's. I'm going to have to give most of the credit to Kids Against Plastic, and I just sat there in the background. My wife and I just sat there, throwing more logs on the fire as she came out, finding out about it, and she's just very passionate about it. So it was easy for us.
So I think what we as teachers can take away from that is obviously leading by example, and instead of trying to force something onto them, we just show through ourselves.
Absolutely.
We be a role model. And obviously our younger students are going to find it very difficult to look and compare themselves to us. So for her to find people that were a tiny bit older than her, but not as old as ourselves, it's going to be easier for her to find that role model in them. And then
they're
our
also
job
much
is to
more
kind of just give the
interested.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, they're also much more interested in people that are similar to their age. Who's going to look at a bald bearded 41-year-old and go, I want to be like him when I'm older? They're going to be like, no way, I don't want to be anything like him. Yes, he can fit 5 pencils in his beard, but that's not an aim in life. So yeah, there's that, obviously. So yeah, finding someone their own age is really important. And the good thing about the climate crisis is there are so many wonderful role models out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good segue onto some recommendations, because we always like to give recommendations for people to go away and look at different things from this show. So material wise, let's go through what you've got to teach people how to change their life and change the planet.
Yeah. Well, I've got 3 series of Renewable English, which are all available upon request. They're all on YouTube, so the materials are up there as well, I believe. Otherwise, I've got plenty. I've got 3 full series worth. And I've also got a book, Activities for a Greener Mindset, as I mentioned before, which every teacher should buy 5 copies of, and give them to all their friends, and then buy 5 more copies, because I'm definitely not on royalties for that book. But I honestly think it is useful for every staff room. I don't think every teacher should buy it, to be perfectly honest. But it's one of those things where you can kind of grab it down and look and be, do you know what? This is a good thing that we can do with our class. Here's a great project. Here's a great idea. And it's 30 different lessons that can take you from Planet Zero to Climate Hero. So that's wonderful. Also, I've worked with a lot of publishers, so there's a lot of materials available on advancing learning from Macmillan. There's loads of lessons on there. Also, if you want a live lesson for your classes, feel free to get in touch. I absolutely love working with new people, both face-to-face and online. In fact, I've got one in Chile next week, so that should be fun. Yeah. So that's what I've got. Anything you need, just get in touch with me anywhere. I'm on all the internets.
And that's teachers and students as well, you know.
Exactly.
I think as teachers, the resources that you're giving us to be able to put into our classrooms are priceless, and the tips and things that I've managed to pick up from some of the podcasts that I've listened to and stuff have been paramount, I think, to a couple of changes that I want to make in our academies.
They're
and then
priceless, but they're also free.
And then also as students, you have all the resources there. Are your materials aimed at certain levels of English?
Some of them not so much. So they're generally, there is kind of the series I would recommend you have around B1, but it also works primary school in the UK. But yeah, around B1 is a pretty useful level to have, because there's some fairly complex vocabulary and ideas in there. So yeah, B1 is a good age. But with some of the materials on advancing learning, for example, there's some for A2, there's some for B2. And yeah, it's generally a lot of it is aimed for teenagers, but it can be very easily adapted to younger learners, because these are, these sustainability principles are trying to make the world a better place, trying to help humanity. So it's kind of a universal theme.
Yeah. And I think what students don't, or what they feel when they're in a classroom and we say, like, we need to do our part, people don't realize what they have to do. And I think it's good for them to see what they have to do from other people. So as a fun little exercise and to give people a takeaway, let's go through things that we or you do on, because you're going to be at the extreme end of it, I think. What you do on a daily basis that people can think, I could do that in my life, and will make a million people doing one small thing makes a big difference. So I've
all heard, 1 million people, all 1 million listeners are gonna do this.
Exactly. And I've heard on a couple of the podcasts you speaking about some certain things that you do. One of the things is obviously buying secondhand shirts and things like that. And then I heard that you are a almost vegan.
Yeah, I'd like to call it a Vaguen.
A vegan.
Yeah, I stole that term from a friend of mine, Emma. Basically, at home vegan, but I live in a small village in Spain. So if we ever go out to eat somewhere, if I'm completely vegan, then I'm eating patatas bravas. That's it. Even
the mayonnaise.
Right, exactly. So I sometimes will have a pizza, or I do sometimes eat eggs, but I can see the chickens just down the road. I'm actually pointing at the chickens now. They're happy chickens. They've all got names, and they all lay eggs, and I can get them myself. So there are those things, but yeah, but it's not about being vegan necessarily. A great thing to do is to eat less meat or eat fewer animal products. That's not to say to go vegan, but we have 21 meals a week. If we're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 times a week, that's 21 meals. Now, I know people who have meat 21 times a week, which is just absurd. And particularly here in Spain in the morning, when you have your tostada, you have your toast, or with that you have ham, or you have salami, or you have chorizo, something like that. So maybe swap that out some days and have something different. And that's not to say to give it up, but just reduce that. So cut back on that and try and have a day or two where you don't eat meat, or go for 5 meals a week where you don't have meat. And they can just be breakfast if you want to start that way. But that's the mindset change. And look at, instead of eating beef, maybe you could eat pork, because beef has a much bigger carbon footprint. And other than all the animal welfare rights behind that, but I'm not going to jump on that right now. So they're kind of the That's the easy way of doing the hard thing. Now, another thing to do with clothes that people don't really think about, and I know here in Spain, there's a kind of weird obsession with dirty clothes. Now, yes, in the summer, you need to wash your clothes every day because it's 8,000 degrees and you sweat buckets. You get home from a 1 minute walk outside and your shirt is completely wet. But in the winter, you don't have to wash your clothes every day. And this will save energy, it will save water, and it will also save hundreds of thousands of microplastics going into the waterways. So simple things like wear your clothes twice, wear your clothes 3 times. It doesn't have to be one day after the other, although I have done that at school before. I have done a wear the same clothes day where everybody in the class wore the same clothes 2 days in a row. To try and remove that stigma of, no, you can't wear the same clothes 2 days in a row. Why not? Why can't I? They're clean still. I haven't sweated them. I didn't roll around in the mud. So yeah, that's another really simple way of making a small difference. And then cut back on plastics.
That's a huge thing. I think it annoys me because there's so much that we can do. Obviously, recycling of all the plastics that we get. But I feel like I have no choice other than to buy certain products in this plastic. And we need to be doing something to get the manufacturers and the suppliers to be using more environmentally friendly packaging. Because
100%.
I go to do my weekly shop. I come home and I always take the plastics off straight away. Because I don't know why they put a cardboard sleeve over a plastic container. Why do we need 2 lots of packaging?
And also bananas, they've got their own kind of plastic on them already. Why are you wrapping them in more plastic? They've got skins, which incidentally are edible.
Banana skins.
I'm not saying just munch into a banana skin, but if you cook them, you can like make them into kind of a fake bacon, and you can. My friend the vegan giddy taught me that. So yeah, you can eat banana skins. Don't eat them raw. Don't eat them raw. That's disgusting.
I think we've all tried it. We all have that curiosity, and it's I wonder what that tastes like. And
I can remember that taste like right now. I can feel that. I can see that memory vividly in my mind of biting into it. It's going, oh no.
Yeah, instant regret when you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You use some more quite cool expressions then in your storytelling. You said sweat buckets. And again, it's little things like that to describe something with so much more colorful vocab. Instead of, I was sweating a lot, which is what a lot of people learning English would say. It was, no, I sweat buckets. And obviously it describes how much sweat is coming
exactly. It shows it with a picture, doesn't it? And if you live in Spain, if you live particularly in the south of Spain, you will know that feeling. Maybe you're in a classroom and the air conditioning doesn't work and you can just see your room full of teenagers just sweating buckets.
Yep. Yeah. And then you said to remove a stigma. And I was trying to think, how could I explain that to a class that don't have much English? To remove the stigma.
Oh, that's a very
difficult
good point.
one. I don't think I've come across that in the English classroom before. How would you explain it without a direct translation?
I'd maybe look for ideas that have a stigma attached to them so I could show them what it was. And so, for example, jumping in muddy puddles. So Peppa Pig has removed the stigma of jumping in muddy puddles in Spain because before Peppa Pig, taking your child out to jump in muddy puddles, people would look at you as if you were evil. So Peppa Pig has taken that stigma away, that it shows that it isn't a bad thing to do that. I walk around my village, well, not all around my village, but I go out to the bins that are not far away from my house with no shoes on. And there's a huge stigma attached to not wearing shoes in Spain, that people think you're going to catch a cold because obviously the bacteria enter through your feet. So I try and remove that stigma, but I'm failing.
There's a book that my wife's currently reading, which says that bacteria doesn't enter through the feet. Let your children walk barefooted, basically. And it's very Spanish thing. My mother-in-law, I can tell when my daughter's here, it's going to be shoes on all the time, and I'm very much a barefoot. I love barefoot running. I love barefoot hiking. I love that connection to the earth and things. Yeah.
Well, I was told off once when Alicia was just a wee baby, and she was in her pram, and she'd taken her sock off, and it was, it was June kind of time, so it was pretty warm, and a lady, a señora, as we would say here, so an older lady, came over and was telling us off because she didn't have a sock on. And I was like, number one, it's really hot. Number two, what right do you have to tell me to not what? Yeah, and yeah, one time we went into the bank very early in the morning, right after they'd finished cleaning, and my daughter fell on the floor and was like sliding around on the floor, and a different senora or older lady was telling her not to slide around on the floor, and that it was dirty. So I decided that I would also slide around on the floor. Rather than arguing, I just showed her that I was a terrible example and a horrible human.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that bank at that time. And that's a good expression as well, a fly on the wall. Is to basically be somewhere but not be conspicuous, so people can't
not
see
be
you
noticed.
in the place, but you can see everything that's going on in a place. So to be a fly on a wall is a really cool expression. Now, one thing I love to do when I have guests on, Harry, is to pass the mic to another English teacher or someone in the English world and get recommendations on, one, who I should invite onto the show, but two, another person for the audience to check out.
Only two.
You can recommend as many as you like. We did at the beginning have a joke that you had 50, and I said I wanted 51. However, Teresa's got the record at the moment. She's recommended 3. So if you want to take the record from Teresa, you have to recommend more than
I'm not going to recommend her because she's already been on. So that's already removed that one from my wheelhouse. So I don't need to do that. I'm going to start with one of my original heroes, is Kath Billsborough, who does all about how to write materials. Basically, she is a materials writing guru, but she has some wonderful stuff, particularly on LinkedIn. She is my favorite influencer, but she also founded ELT Footprint, which was one of the original founding members of ELT Footprint, which kind of showed me when I started out in this line of work, because I've been an activist for many, many years, but it showed me that other people cared. So Catherine Billsborough is an absolute legend. She's brilliant. A newish person that I've recently discovered within the last few months is Stephen Farron. I love his posts on LinkedIn. I think they'd be very good for teachers and students, because every day he posts a new idiom. So a lot of the things that we've talked about, a lot of the real English we've focused on, have been about idioms, and he posts a new one every day with a focus on the environment. So I'd definitely say he's worth checking out. There's just so many. I'm going to say Anna Hasper, because she was the person who was my boss at the company which I brought to its knees. And she also recently released a book about social and emotional learning in the English classroom. So, and yeah, she was, as I mentioned, my boss. And I now refer to her as boss whenever I see her.
Brilliant.
She's very, very cool. I'm going to stop at 3 because I don't want to overtake T. I'm going to stay on a level with T, but there are just so many wonderful educators out there.
100%.
Go and check them out. Go and have a look at. They're all doing different things. There are people who are teaching directly to students. There are people who are helping other teachers, and they're just great people to get involved with and to talk to and to build your network and build your English if you're a learner.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do quickly on the screen, we're just going to go through your socials so people have a place to go. So you're on Instagram, which is Renewable English. YouTube, same name, Renewable English. LinkedIn, we've gone with personal branding. So you're Harry Waters.
That's me.
And you're very active on LinkedIn, I've noticed. Probably more so than the other platforms, right?
Definitely. Although I didn't post anything yesterday. Do you know why? Because I had nothing useful to say. I only post when I have something useful to say. I don't feel like, I'm not a huge fan of posting for content's sake. So I tend to post when I have something useful to say, which is a terrible marketing technique, but it's just the way I work.
Yeah, and it works as well, quality over quantity. I think definitely, and that can go into sustainability as well, buy
100%.
Quality things instead of quantity. And then the last one is your Facebook page, again, Renewable English. So I will leave them all in the show description as well. And I want to end by just saying that obviously you came into my radar recently, and it's been a really fun journey going through your content to kind of get to know you before we recorded this episode. And it's made me realize that I need to find, my passion is teaching. I love teaching. However, I can see that your passion is teaching, but you've taken it even further and you're doing something incredible with Renewable English and trying to have a huge impact on how we can improve the damage that we've done to this planet, and hopefully do good and leave it in a better place for our children. So I just want to say a massive thank you from myself, but I suspect from a lot of people that are on the same journey as you. And I know, for one, as a teacher, I'm going to start to bring in a lot more of the sustainability lessons that you recommend into my classes. And I'm going to make some serious changes in my academies as well to do our bit and to kind of get onto this journey as well. So thank you for being an inspiring human being.
Thank you. I would usually take my hat off to you in this point, but as you may have noticed, I've not been wearing a hat today.
Which normally you do.
I do. There's even one right here, so I'm going to put it on so I can take it off. We're kind of between hat seasons at the moment, so
yeah.
I'm going from the flat cap, but it's a bit warm for those. But I didn't feel like wearing a regular cap was really my vibe today, so I just went straight up, no hair, no hat.
I like it. I mean, I love wearing a hat. However, it just don't suit me. I can't pull it off like you can.
Oh, wow.
You're able to pull it off somehow.
Thankfully. Otherwise, I'd get a very sunburnt head. And on that
very true. And on that note, thank you again, Harry. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we're in contact, because I'm going to be picking your brains about a lot of things.
Feel free. They are here to pick. See you later, mate.
See you.
Si disfrutaste de este episodio y quieres llevar tu inglés al siguiente nivel, te invitamos a descubrir nuestros cursos online en theway.es, diseñados para mejorar tu fluidez y confianza en situaciones reales. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a transformar su aprendizaje. Visita ahora theway.es y realiza nuestro test de nivel interactivo de manera gratuita. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen de Midterm cómodamente desde casa.